And Carrie, I've been asked to continue. We're good now?
Yes, we are live.
Okay, so we've got the calling the Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Let's item number one is roll call. June 22nd, 2021 Board of Adjustment meeting. It is 6:03. Let's do the roll call. Chris Braden present. If each individual could do that as well.
Brad O'Donnell present.
Keith Martinson present.
Brooke Brown,
Say again.
Brooke Brown present.
Jim Beneke, present.
That's everybody. Yeah, I think I checked everybody off. Okay, so do we have, it's now 6:04 and we've got a call for public comment for any items that are not on the agenda. Do we have anybody that's signed up for that?
We did not have a sign up process. If you are here visiting and would like to speak during public comment, you can raise your hand. I don't see anybody on the calling in by phone, but if you do call in by phone, it is *9 to raise your hand. And at this time, we do not have any hands raised.
Okay, so we'll go on to item number 2 for just kind of the consent agenda items. Item number 2 is discussion, possible action on the minutes from December 8th, 2020 Board of Adjustment meeting. I'd like to call a motion to approve call a motion to approve those minutes.
I would so
Moved.
Keith.
Sir,
Keith Martinson would move to approve the minutes.
all those in favor to approve?
Need a second.
How do we do the vote on this? We raise our hands?
You need a second first.
Oh, we got a
I'll
second. I
second
think
it.
we got a second from Jim.
Thank you. And then if
Yeah,
we could just
Beneke was
call a roll call vote, just for the sake of the virtual meeting, so we can make sure everybody votes.
Understood. Chris Braden approve.
Keith approved.
Aye.
Brad O'Donnell approved.
Jim Beneke approved.
This is Brooke. I'm going to abstain since I was not present at that meeting.
Take it done threshold wise on the vote. 4 out of 5 gets it done.
Yes.
Very good. Motion to approve it rather than minutes from December 8th, 2020. Let's see here. And coach me up if I need to keep calling out the time. I got coached up on that a while back, so I'll just keep saying it. We don't need it. We don't need it, I guess. 6:06, we get to number 3 on the regular agenda. Number 3, public hearing, discussion and possible action on the variance from the city's code of ordinances, section 107-35. No tennis court shall be constructed or maintained in the area between the rear setback line and the rear lot line for the Western Hills Athletic Club at 4801 Rolling Wood Drive. We're to open to the public, to hear the public on this, and it is 6:07 to do so. Is there anyone that wishes to speak at this time?
We have Zachary Elkins hand raised. Zach, and you can unmute.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Zach, and if you don't mind, just for the record, could state your full name and your address, please, sir?
Yeah, Zachary Elkins, 16 North Peak. And yeah, I was alerted to this and just thought I'd come and offer my perspective. And I realized that there's a lot of considerations with respect to this project. And I have a neighbor a couple blocks away, and appreciate what you guys do in terms of stewardship of the community. And I'm also a member of the Western Hills and play tennis there. So I see it's kind of an interesting project. One thing I've been thinking about a little bit is, it just feels like Western Hills is just a nice asset to the community, and I've just come to appreciate everything they do, and kids and families taking part there. And I think in some ways tennis is a big part of it, but it's clear that it's been kind of in disrepair, and this project seems like it makes some necessary renovations and just expands in kind of a reasonable way. And I just see a lot of direct benefits to a lot of people. It's been a very community-oriented club and kind of low-key and services many people in the community. And so I think a lot of people would benefit probably directly, but then also indirectly. I think it's probably worth noting this is not just a residential variance for a developer or private family, but it benefits the whole community. And so I think many of us see this as kind of a gem in Rollingwood. And so, and the board at Western Hills, I think, has done a really good job in their previous renovations, the pool, some other things. And so that's given me, some faith that they know what they're doing and deserve some credibility in carrying this out. And I guess the other thing I'd say is that, I think it's worthwhile to, build these community resources for, people to, families and kids to get off screens and exercise and hang out with each other. I think all of us during the pandemic realized we don't do enough of that. But also, I think in terms of the environmental considerations, I think all of us appreciate keeping it really beautiful and livable community. And tennis, or at least this project, I think compared to other kind of recreational facilities, tennis has always been really good neighbors with people. It's, unlike, I guess, Little League games at Hatley, tennis is just a couple of people at a time, no spectators, no extra cars. It's generally pretty subdued game almost by definition. And I think, if landscaped well, these tennis courts can be really just really subdued and kind of recede into the landscape, and maybe even enhance the property and the community in terms of beauty. So I mean, a good example, I think, is the Terry House facility in Terrytown. So they have 4 courts on a kind of a smaller lot, and it's just really beautifully done and really subtle. And people in that neighborhood, I think, don't even know that it exists. And so I think it could be done really well, and it just feels like we should give. This is the kind of thing that we should really accommodate as a community and let Western Hills, who are also volunteers like you guys and are invested in the community, give them a chance to carry this out the right way. Anyway, thanks for listening. That's really all I have.
Thank you, Zach. Do you have anybody else that wish to speak in the public hearing on this particular item?
At this time, there are no hands raised.
Okay, with that, then let's see. We'll close, at least on this particular agenda item. We'll close the public piece of it. So, say again.
Hi, sorry. I didn't know if you'd be able to hear me or not. I'm a board member with the Western Hills Athletic Club, and I don't know if this would be the appropriate time for me to speak and kind of explain the project a little bit, or if that is later in the agenda.
Well, no, absolutely you can, Marie. If you don't mind, just if you would just state your name and your address, if indeed. Are you speaking on behalf of Western Hills Athletic Club?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, if indeed that happens to be in Rollingwood City, you can state your address. Otherwise, just we'll understand you're speaking on behalf of WAC.
My name is Marie Timmerman, and I'm a board member at the Western Hills Athletic Club, and I reside at 501 Vale Street in Rollingwood. So these courts were built in 1976. The average lifespan of a hard surface tennis court is somewhere between 20 and 25 years. These are 45 years old. They're definitely overdue a redo. There are cracks throughout the courts. And we have about maybe 5 years ago made an attempt to resurface these. It took about 6 months before we started to see the cracks reappearing. There's been significant advancement in how tennis courts are built. And I think if they were rebuilt today, we would eliminate a lot of those problems. There's concern if we continue, the disrepair continues, that at some point we'll get into a safety issue. So that is certainly something that we would like to avoid. In terms of us expanding the courts, the reason we'd like to do that is it would really help our programming. We sometimes run into issues during peak hours, like in the afternoons. We have juniors that would like to take lessons. And then we also have adults who come off of work and would like to play some tennis. And so we kind of have to battle with, you know, who gets to use the courts during that time. It would also, you know, allow us to do some increased programming that would benefit our membership, many who are residents of Rollingwood. The setback rules that are in place, I imagine, you know, they're in effect to protect the neighbor that lives right next door. We've been in communications with that neighbor, Mo Goyal, and he's not opposed to the project. And we will continue to work with him in terms of our landscaping and things to make sure that we're being good neighbors if we do indeed get to move forward with the project. The area that we are trying to extend into that would continue the nonconformity, one of the setbacks talks about a 30-foot green belt buffer zone. It is currently not a green belt buffer zone. There is an existing volleyball court, sand volleyball court in that spot. So if we were to extend into that area, we wouldn't be eliminating green belt space. We would just be eliminating the sand volleyball court, which, you know, so it just, we're trading one recreational use for another. Let's see, the plan that we've chosen seems to us to be the best choice. I think in your packet, the last page, I think it's page 40. There's a diagram that we submitted that kind of shows there's a blue line. If we were to move these courts or shift them, we would lose additional trees, potentially up to 20 trees. And there is a particular tree that is in between the courts and the parking lot that is a large heritage oak that we would definitely lose. And we would like to preserve that if possible. I mean, I don't think that this project would injure the public. I think it would only enhance our, you know, facilities that are available to many of our community members. So, I mean, I think, you know, in our judgment, you'll have the power to either grant a variance, or my understanding is a special exception. I don't know if that is possible, but we really, our membership is really in support of this, and we would really like to be able to move forward with our project. Are there any questions that anyone would like to ask me about the project that maybe I can answer? We also have our engineer online, I've noticed, and our landscaped architect, I believe, as well.
Well, I think we'll have the opportunity to potentially do that in terms of asking some questions in a minute. I see we've got a couple other hands up. So why don't we, Marie, why don't we move? I think I saw Brad raise his hand first. Brad, you want to go ahead, sir?
Yes, can
State
you
your name,
hear
state
me?
your name. I can, we can hear you, Brad. State your name, address, please, sir.
All right, Brad Walters, 2702 Rollingwood Drive.
Go for it, Brad.
All right. Well, just, board members and everyone that's working, thank you very much. And thank you for your service to the community. I just wanted to sort of throw my 2 cents in as a supporter and, echo everything that Zach and Marie have said. It's, I think it's a great complementary sort of use for Rollingwood, and lots of, tennis courts have, like a lot of things, there's sort of a critical mass that if you can get, 4 is a lot better than 2 as far as kind of getting neighborhood activities together and just more chance. I think it just builds community in the neighborhood to be able to do that in a good way, as Zach pointed out. It's not screen time, it's kind of getting people out of the house. And I've never seen a fight on a tennis court, so it's kind of all good interaction. So, thanks for your consideration.
Very good, Brad. Thank you. I'm not sure who FIDFO is in my upper left-hand corner, but I'd like to recognize them. If you want to state your name and your address, we'd be glad to hear from you.
It's Mike Fitzgerald, Chris. Nice. I don't know why it says FIDFO. I guess maybe that's my gamer tag, I think, from way back.
That's too much information there, sir.
Right. Real quick, I just wanted to jump in on this tennis thing. I just wanted to offer up, first of all, thanks to all the volunteers that make this community as great as it is. And I'm at 442 Ridgewood Road, by the way. I think that it would be great to have a little bit more occupancy or vacancy at those tennis courts. That they are in pretty bad shape. That volleyball court down there does not get used. And it's in fact probably a little bit of a safety issue because I think it attracts wildlife, and it's basically a big sand kitty litter box, if you will, that is a concern of its own. And also I think that there's other sports that we could do on those courts, like pickleball, which I think is a real great way for people as they get older. It's a great way to get them back on tennis courts. And I think that's something that is in consideration as we think about this particular project. And I think I'm hopeful that we can work our way around some of the setback rules. And it sounds like the direct neighbors are cooperative. And just wanted to offer up our family's support of the expansion of the tennis courts. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mike. At risk of almost cutting off the public hearing with people actually wanting to speak, I almost missed Marie there. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? You can raise your hand with the feature there on your screen. I see, looks like, Carrie, am I right? Phil McDuffie, I think, in my upper left-hand corner. Phil, would you like to go ahead, sir?
Sure. Thank all y'all. Phil McDuffie, 4711 Timberline Drive. I don't know much about this project. I'm just wondering how, I know there has been some concern raised by some people that I've spoken to about potential increasing flooding to the people over on Pleasant Cove and maybe even over on Nixon. And I was just hoping someone could speak to how that's planning on being mitigated with this project. That's the only question I have about it.
Understood, Phil. Carrie or somebody else with the city, coach me up in terms of, I've noted that question. That's obviously something that's going to probably be answered by Marie, or I know she mentioned the engineer. Do we address that?
I'll be glad.
Say it again.
Our engineers have reviewed these plans. There are associated drainage plans with this project. We have reviewed it for those downstream concerns and not found any. There was some impervious cover questions posed to me. My intention for this project is to require a survey before I issue a certificate of occupancy that just shows that they are within those impervious cover calculations that they have specified. But the drainage and the impervious cover is not up for consideration tonight, just the setbacks.
Okay, great.
Understood.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. Anybody else on the, at least with respect to number 3, want to speak in the public hearing? Any animals publicly? Okay. Let's see here. Then I'm going to go ahead and at 6:23, we will close the public hearing portion, at least with respect to this agenda item. And let's see here. We'll discuss within the board, and I imagine there's going to be some discussion here, possibly a motion at some point. Any board discussion regarding this?
Other than more is always better, is there any magic to 4 courts versus 3 courts?
It's so you could potentially have participate in leagues, which would basically what that is it's 8 people from the Western Hills Athletic Club invite 8 people from Austin Country Club, and they come over and they play a match, and that's it. But so it leaves the availability to do something like that. You can't do that without 4 courts because it's 4 matches happening at once, and the requirement is that you have 4 courts to participate in something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Was splitting the courts up so they're not side by side, was that part of the consideration? I know that would take out more trees, which is bad, but besides trees, was any more thought upon that?
Maria, is there did you catch that? Did you catch that question?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. The trees are the main concern. I mean, it's a small area to maneuver in. There is also when you build them side by side, you need I think a little bit less area because the courts kind of share the area in between. But our main concern is not taking out the least amount of trees as that we possibly can and still have 4 courts.
I have a similar question.
I'm sorry. Go for it, Brooke.
Thank you. When I look at the IP, the plan that was done for impervious cover, I think it's the last document in the packet. It shows 4 courts in pink, and then it's got a dotted area that shows where you would move the courts if you had to meet the setback requirements. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
The first 2 courts in pink do the new 2 courts, I guess, that would be on the eastmost side, are they on the same surface as the old courts?
When you mean same surface, do you mean like same elevation or in the same footprint?
Same footprint.
Not exactly. So we are right now, the way the courts are built, there's one, and then there's a very large steeped retaining wall. We will be regaining we are going to be leveling the courts. So those first 2 courts are at the same elevation, and we will be gaining space by getting rid of that large sloped retaining wall. So it'll be in the old footprint, there will be 2 courts plus some of a 3rd court. Does that make sense?
Okay, so are you, when you do the new courts, that raises one other question, and I couldn't tell, with the new court, are you still, as you propose it, are you still outside the side setback on the east side?
Yeah, is that the street you're saying, the street side?
Wallace, on the Wallace side.
Yeah, no, yes, we're not moving, we're still starting in the same spot, but we'll be getting, in that spot, we will be getting more court. Does that make sense?
You're taking out what was in between the.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Shifts to the east a bit, the second court.
Yes, what's in between the 2 courts now, we're utilizing some of that space for actual tennis court space now.
Okay. Well, let me ask one more question if I could. For the 2 western courts, the 2 new courts, did you consider pulling those forward or toward the clubhouse so that those don't enter the back setback, the back 30 feet?
Yeah, so we would yes, and partly, I mean, even if you separated them and you had only 2 courts being pulled back, you would still lose those trees.
Which trees?
The trees on not the Wallace side, the trees on the park side. If you look at that diagram on page 40, you'll see where the blue dotted line is. There's a lot of circles within those lines.
I'm pulling that up now.
Yeah, it looks like there's two trees it would take out. They don't look like very large ones. I don't see a tree list immediately.
Well, no. Which page of the sport court plan?
It should be of that. I thought on that agenda, the agenda packet, it was the last final page.
It's called 100 IMP cover, Brooke.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so if you look at the blue, just the blue dotted line, you'll see that that's where we've pulled the courts back the 30 feet to create the setback. All those circles that you see on towards, those are all trees.
Yes. What my question is, if you look at the 2 pink courts on the western side.
Yes.
The 2 new pink courts.
Yes.
If you pull those toward the clubhouse to the blue line, leaving the 2 eastern courts where on the footprint they are now, don't you avoid taking out those trees?
We will still hit some of the trees. And then I believe that we also still may get into compromising the large tree, but David, maybe you can speak better to the drawing.
Where is
Marie? Chris Braden. I was looking at that as well, Brooke, and I was kind of with not so much a similar question, but I did notice that it looks like Marie, and I'm not able to really zoom in much here, but it in a conforming alignment, how close would those courts be to what looks like the corner of maybe a covered area? That looks like it would be pretty close to the edge of that.
Yes, I mean, it would, yes, it is very close to the building, which, is not desirable either, but.
Okay. I'm sorry, and I interrupted. I think I think the engineer is about to comment on, or provide an answer to Brooke.
Yeah, this is David with MWM. One of the reasons the courts are stepped back like that is because of water quality. So there's existing water quality on the west side of the big tree, and then for the new tennis courts, we had to squeeze in some water quality between the tennis court and the building. So that's one of the reasons why they're pushed back where they are right now.
What do you mean water quality? I'm
So
not.
TCEQ requires us to treat a certain amount, the certain impervious cover that has been increased on the site. And in order for us to do that, we had to install some devices basically in the ground between the tennis court and the building. And that area where you're talking about moving the courts is where those infrastructure is.
But I thought that you were suggesting that the dotted blue line would be where you would move these courts if the setbacks weren't approved, if the variance was.
That is correct. And in that case, we would have to redo all of the water quality. So if you look on the right side of that little purple sidewalk, there's kind of a little rectangle between the tree and the sidewalk.
I'm not sure. If you could locate the tree you're talking about, that would help me.
It's the big tree, the 20,016.
I'm maybe there's numbers you can see, but I can't.
It's between the parking lot and the tennis court. There's a very large oak tree, I think it is there.
Which court?
The two courts on the right.
Between the parking lot and the two courts on the right. I am not seeing a tree there.
Brooke, if there's a big old circle kind of where the bright green meets the light green within the parking lot, and it kind of encompasses some of the pink stuff. The actual 2,000 or 200, what is that?
20,000.
20,016 is kind of hidden behind one of the little blue diagonal lines.
It's about as big as the pool is, so it's big.
It's quite large.
I'm seeing a circle, but I'm not seeing where it doesn't have a.
Yeah, I think that's it. What you're looking at, Brooke. In fact, the circle that's needs to be referenced is actually kind of going through. If you look at the words, it says proposed courts aligned with 30-foot setback. That line, that circular line, actually kind of goes through the word setback. So kind of follow that around.
Okay. So
as far as I'm reading it,
I see the circle, but that tree's there currently.
That tree's there currently. Yes, ma'am.
And that you've got the two courts on the right that are there currently.
That's correct.
So where's the trunk? I mean, if that tree.
It is, if you're looking at the bottom right corner of the blue dash line, you go the two diagonal lines, go left 2 diagonal lines.
Okay, it's where the.
Yep, and it's on that second diagonal line, just a little ways up from the dashed line.
Okay.
Between like what that looks like rocks and the dash line.
Okay. Well, here's my question. If you pull the two westernmost courts forward to the blue dash line, you're not going to impact that tree.
That is correct. The impact of that tree would be very minimal. But to the left of that tree, you might see a rectangular shaped structure. It's got a left side, a bottom, and a right side, and they kind of touch the wall and the sidewalk.
I see.
That is an existing rain garden that the facility owns that had to be constructed when they made their last round of improvements. And if we move the courts like we're talking about, we would have to redo that rain garden. And we also would have to find a place for the water quality treatment that TCEQ requires for our project. So the space there is really tight, and it'd be really difficult to try to get all of that in there and preserve the trees and not impact the building and not further impact the trees that are to the west of the tennis court. Did I explain?
But if
that
you
good?
just the two western courts forward, you wouldn't be impacting those trees that are to the left of them.
Well, I don't know where we would put the stormwater quality that TCEQ requires. It has to go somewhere, and if that's the only space available, then we might have to put it down there, which would then affect those trees.
Aren't you going to put it under court, the fourth court, the court furthest on the west?
There is some stuff underneath that court, and that is the detention pond. So the detention pond is what keeps the downstream folks from flooding. The water quality takes the particulates out of the stormwater and then passes it to the detention pond.
So it would be doable to do that. You would just have to relocate or redesign that water quality facility. You'd still have could do the detention pond as you're proposing now under the fourth one to the west.
Without studying it, I don't know. The complication there is that the stormwater has to go to the water quality pond first before it goes to detention. And if we locate it on the west side of those tennis courts, then our water quality treatment is going to be downstream of our detention treatment. So that means either we have to dig deeper to put the detention in, or we might have to put in pumps to get water into the detention, or we might have to relocate the detention out from under the tennis court somewhere else on the site, which then of course impacts trees again.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering those questions.
You're very welcome.
Anybody else discussion amongst board members? Any questions or further comment?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a lot to say.
We'll go for it, Brad. That's
if anyone
why
else
we've got it
has,
carved out.
if anyone else has any questions, go ahead and ask them first before I start going off.
I was finished with that line of that issue, but I do have questions whenever that's appropriate.
Well,
I just have a quick question. Amber, do we have any communication from any of the neighbors on this? I mean, written communication?
I didn't receive any. Ashley, did you receive any? Or Carrie, have you gotten any?
I have not received any written communication. I know that both Mo Boyle and I don't believe Buck Shapiro was at the council meeting where this was brought up, but Mo discussed this and didn't seem to have any concerns with it. And I've had communications with Buck, verbal communications, that he was not opposed to this project. But I have not had any written letters of support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. I'd like, either Brooke or Brad, obviously. Brad, it sounds like you don't necessarily have any questions, and maybe it's not going to affect what you like to discuss or say within the context of it. Brooke, what are those questions that you've got?
Okay. Well, I think one is a question about the application, and it's dated May 18. The application's dated May 18, right? I don't think we saw it until, was this in our packet this last week?
It was not. That was my fault. I was on vacation and was derelict with my document duties.
Okay. And then the decision that's being appealed, is that the decision that's in the April 8 letter?
The April 8, the notice from the city.
Yes, the one that's from
Yes.
David Garza's.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right.
Okay. I'm sorry, Brooke, I didn't mean to cut you off. Was there more there?
And maybe this is for the, I'm looking through my notes here, for the engineer. It looks like how close is the back line of the tennis courts as proposed by WAC to the property line? I don't think I saw a measurement there.
It's proposed right now at 11 feet.
11 feet, okay.
Yeah, there's a 10-foot PUE there, and we're trying to be just outside the PUE.
Okay. And then on the Wallace side, it looks like the 30-foot setback there comes right at the corner. I'm not sure what outside the pink area, which is the court, there's something that's dotted, but I'm not sure what that structure is, and it looks like it's in the setback on that side.
That is a concrete drainage swale. That side of the site is uphill of the tennis courts, and so we're trying to catch the water before it gets to the court, and we're routing it around to the sides of the court.
Okay.
Because as I understand it, I think, having looked at this from an elevation standpoint, that court as it exists at a higher elevation is going to be sunk. Is that accurate to be? Because I heard Marie speak to the fact that delta between the true elevations is going to be reduced, if not made zero. Is that accurate?
I think she was speaking to the second court is going to be brought up. I'd have to go back into the plans.
Okay, brought up. Okay, brought up. Understood. Brooke, do you have any other items there?
The last question is, have you talked with the neighbors who are along Pleasant Cove? And what is their position?
So we have attempted to contact them, but we have not had luck. There was, I forget in what manner it got to us, that they had some concerns about drainage. But I would assume that if our drainage plan meets the city requirements, that shouldn't be an issue.
Okay.
We have attempted to reach out to them multiple times.
I know that I actually live on the corner of Nixon and Pleasant Cove, so I know where that water comes across Pleasant Cove, the drainage now from the Western Hills. And it goes into a culvert that runs behind the houses on the block of Nixon where there are drainage problems currently. So this would be increased amount of water. As I understand, the drainage ordinance regulates the speed at which the water exits, but it doesn't require it. If there's more impervious cover today than in previous uses, it doesn't limit the volume, it just limits the speed on which that water travels from the property. Would that be right? So there would be increased flow volume?
Brooke, can I piggyback on that question for the engineer? I think I followed at a city level pretty closely all the different drainage stuff that's going on, and maybe different than your question, but sort of piggybacked on. It would be my understanding, and this is what I want to try to get from the engineer, that really, I mean, without some sort of uniform code with our city and in terms of being able to, you know, deal with our water, that it's almost on each one of our individual, you know, it's on the residents on an individual basis to kind of be that, do the things that TCEQ requires in order to kind of help out the city in that regard. So are we hurting here our ability to deal with water, or is this actually, although potentially increasing impervious coverage, is the drainage plan per se actually helping to, you know, deal with water that's coming down on that property in a way that might be better than it currently is? That would be a question that I'd want to piggyback with Brooke. I think we kind of had the same questions in a different way. And then David, can you speak to that?
So I'll start speaking, and then I think Julia's online. If I misstate something, she'll jump in and correct me. So there is more volume of water on the site because of the impervious cover, and the regulations require us to release that volume of water at the rate that it's currently being released today. And so that's what the system is actually designed to do. The way that that system is put together, because it's a prefab underground system, we are actually able to get a little bit more detention out of it. So we're actually detaining a little bit more water on the site before it's being released and letting it go downstream.
Yeah, this is Julia. That's accurate. What the Brooke, what the detention, and Chris, what the detention pond does is also release at a different time period. So if you can imagine, even though over a larger area there may be more water, it's less at any given time. Does that make sense? So you're basically taking that flow off of the peak so that the system downstream can handle it because it's not getting it all at once. Does that make sense? So it does. So from that perspective, it does improve because we're detaining it and releasing that water at that existing rate, but also at a different time, like over a longer period of time.
So reduction in impervious coverage, but net gain in our ability to deal with the water through there, just on a property by property basis in particular here.
Increase in impervious cover.
Excuse me, yeah. Increase in impervious coverage, but excuse me, correct. An increase in impervious coverage, but a net gain in our ability to deal with that water. Okay.
Because it's actually being controlled versus just free flow. Yes.
Just to back up my fellow PEs here, I've designed a bunch of ponds, and the idea is that after construction, downstream is not affected, and most times you're improving what's going on downstream. So I've not actually reviewed these drainage plans, but assuming it's designed correctly, it should not hurt anything downstream, and it should probably make things much better.
And they've also been under review from TCEQ as well.
Carrie?
I'd like to jump in here. just to steer us back on course a little bit, our engineers have looked at this. They have reviewed these engineered plans that the applicant has provided, and they have signed off stating that there is no downstream harm from this. And that drainage is not, that's not up for consideration. That's already been vetted and approved by our engineers.
Understood. Brad, you sounded, thank you.
As it relates to these plans. Now, if the variance was denied and new plans came, then we would need new drainage plans, and we would review those at that time to make sure that it complies with our regulations, state regulations, and met TCEQ standards.
Understood. Thank you, Carrie. Now, Brad, I think I understand that you've got more there to visit on.
Not about the pond stuff, but
Just a
to
general.
I mean, I'm the type of person I like to see things get done. I don't like seeing anyone held back on what they're supposed to do. But there are these rules in place. So just to get the ball rolling on where we might start voting. As far as the existing courts, I see zero problem at all with redoing fully the existing courts. If they're in bad shape, fix them. As far as the two new ones, the rules are there, and so my immediate feeling with the rules is that the two new courts shouldn't be there. But at the same time, I mean, other than the neighbors having an issue with this, I don't really see a problem community-wise. In fact, I see it more as a positive thing. I do like what Brooke was saying about moving those two western courts down. I think the water quality pond could also be put beneath the courts. So you could completely redo the new courts. You could completely redo the existing courts. You could move the two new courts down, move the water quality beneath those courts. And I don't see a problem with that. And then finally, if everyone here is on board with it, if no one wants to change anything and everyone is really good with this plan as is, I would say I would feel okay approving it as long as there was written agreement from the owners of the adjacent land saying that it's fine. So that's my 5 cents on how we could move forward.
Brad, we've done this a while together, but I'm not sure that is that something that can we issue a
we're allowed to say anything we want. We can add on any requirements that we want.
Contingent upon some written approval by adjacent owners.
Sure, I don't see any reason, and I'm sure the law can back us up here on that.
Chris, I just went through my email, and I did find a couple of letters sent from the McMahons, and Ashley just forwarded the letters to you. They're in your inbox.
Would it be worth a read? Now, granted, this would be one particular neighbor. Is this one of the neighbors that's it's on Pleasant Cove?
Yeah, that's the one right downstream from them.
Ashley, could you send that to all of us, or is that Amber?
Ashley just sent it out.
The Board of Adjustment. You should all have that in your inbox.
And we also have Buck Shapiro. He just joined us, who's an adjacent neighbor as well.
Hey, so open for public comment right now, or?
Yep, you're ready. Actually, no, it's not a public comment, but I would say, given what Brad just indicated in terms of his, some of the stipulations you'd like to see, I think we'd like to hear from you.
All right.
Chairman, could you please reopen the public hearing? I apologize, but if you would.
100%, Megan.
Open the public
100%.
hearing. Thank you.
Yeah, let's reopen on this particular item number 3. Let's reopen the public hearing at 6:57. I want to recognize Buck, but go ahead and state your name and your address.
this is Council Member Shapiro, 406 Wallace Drive. I live 2 houses down from the tennis courts. I do have a question to start. So are y'all going with the proposed alignment at the 30-foot setback? Because there's a couple attachments in here that are a little conflicting. So I just want to make sure I know which direction y'all are going in, or they're asking. So if you 100 impervious cover attachment, it has in blue dots proposed courts aligned with 30-foot setback. So
I can answer that. Those blue dots are where, if you shifted all 4 of those courts and to be, without, you'd shift them over there to not needing these various variances. The ones they're proposing are the ones are the kind of the more
where the
pink and the.
Well, I do not have a problem with the courts, with making improvements and adding 2 additional courts. I mean, obviously, I live 2 houses down, so I'm definitely feel like I'm a stakeholder in this, and it would have an impact on my property values, but I don't feel like it would be negative. I do know that some of the other neighbors, I can't really speak on behalf of the Goyles. Are they on here by any chance?
I don't see them. There is one tile that happens to just be represented by a phone icon, so it could be them.
All right. Yeah, so I don't want to speak on behalf of anybody, but I'm sure since it probably impacts them more than anybody, just because it's next door, literally. I mean, they act as a buffer to me. So for me, I mean, I see the tennis courts every day when I drive by, but I'm all for amenities in the neighborhood. I want more amenities. I think 4 courts would add a ton of benefit to the neighborhood. More, I don't know, leagues and stuff for my kids to join that's in the neighborhood, and I don't have to drive them somewhere to do it. So I'm 100% for the expansion of the tennis courts. So I don't know if that's what y'all were wanting, is to kind of hear where I stood or not, but that's where I stand on this.
Thank you, Buck. I think that's probably exactly in the neighborhood of what Brad was looking for, and I think that goes a long way with me as well. All these, obviously, there's a lot of considerations, but there may not be many more that are more important than the people that abut to any of these issues, whether we're hearing about this, the tennis court or something else. Jim and Keith, do you have anything because I kind of want to start to, begin to figure out how, one, if we're going to make some motions here, if there's any questions, discussions, where we may be, any comments there for either of you gentlemen?
I sort of go back. What Brad was saying is, I like the idea of the tennis courts, but also then we have regs or ordinances that say you should have a 30-foot setback on any impervious cover or building from a residential property line for a city park or the swimming pool. And so, I mean, we have regs that say this, but we say we don't want to do that. So, I mean, it's sort of a quandary. Why do we have the regs if we're not going to follow them? But as far as I do like the idea, and I don't see much of a, except for water, which is not our drainage, is not our problem. I don't see a big problem if the neighbors are willing to accept pickleballs or tennis balls or whatever at 7 o'clock in the morning being bounced back and forth.
Well, there's one neighbor that doesn't, if you haven't had a chance to read the McMahon letter. They do not recommend approval.
And mainly for the drainage issue.
Yeah, I haven't had an opportunity to read that yet.
Which I think is.
Which isn't that being addressed
an issue
with the detention ponds? I mean, it seems like the drainage should get better, not worse, with the engineering.
Yeah, we hit that for sure, Buck.
And the McMahons are also in the process of selling their house for whatever that's worth.
I
understood.
No,
I also have an understanding that they have some pretty unique situations with their lot with drainage and caverns and stuff like that, which most of us don't have.
Okay, Megan, do we need to reclose the
Yes,
public
sir.
hearing of this? Yeah, I could see you
Thank
looking
you.
at me even through a computer.
Hey, Chris,
yeah.
this is Julia. Can I address one question that Brad had brought out?
Absolutely.
I don't know there was really a question, but I just wanted to clarify when we were talking about, the first two courts being, more or less over the existing courts, or I guess really the first 2.5 courts. And then we're kind of talking about those 2 western courts. Those would be located where there's currently the volleyball court that is within that 30-foot setback existing. So if that just kind of helps frame, we're still within that existing, almost, I don't want to say grandfather, that's probably not the right word for this, but we're just replacing what's already there in that 30-foot, if that makes sense.
I think that helps, because it is
like a pre-existing
a
condition.
used, it is a used space. I mean, it's not impervious cover, but I mean, as far as the annoyance to a neighbor, I see
Especially
that.
that cat urine.
Well,
I see
if
that
y'all were to
being in the
look
same
at the
place.
property lines and go in the backyards of the Goyles house, I mean, you would see that the 2 proposed new courts are basically way back in their backyard. And there's a pretty good green buffer back there between those courts with, what they would be able to see just from their backyard, if you've ever been in their backyard, and then the school fields behind them, which also border me. I mean, there's a lot of green shrubbery back there. So yeah, it might not be 30 feet from the property line, but it's pretty far from an improvement from a house.
Megan,
Just
I'm gonna go ahead and thank you.
Can I
Buck.
just make one other comment? I know that Keith, you had mentioned that, we have these rules, and why do we have these rules if we're not going to adhere to them? I will also say, I mean, our courts, they were built in 1976. It was so far before these rules came into existence. And we're really disadvantaged by the fact that, we built them and then the rules of the game changed. And there is also in the rules, the Board of Adjustments does have the ability to grant, an exception under 107-491 when it's in its judgment, the public convenience and welfare are not going to be substantially or permanently injured. They can allow the enlargement of or an extension of a non-conforming use or building. So, I mean, I think the rules do also anticipate that there'll be situations where maybe we should be given a little consideration. And that's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Marie. Megan, I've got it. We'll close the public hearing, the second one rather, at 7:06. Anything else as we look to get closer to a close on item number 3? Okay. Well, I'm a WAC member. I'd like, I've heard that I agree with Keith in general that, we've got these rules in place for a reason. For me, and it sounds like for a couple of our board members, the situation satisfies potentially. We'll obviously have to take a vote on that. And because of that, and I need a little bit of coaching up here, maybe from Carrie, obviously I'd like to make a motion to approve with respect to number 3, approve the variance for the area between the rear setback line and rear lot line, mostly because I believe it's, within the conditions that we're tasked with getting by, the 7 conditions. I think that it satisfies those. Do I need to make any specific note of those 7 conditions within the motion to approve? That might be a Megan question.
I'm looking at Megan.
Okay, I need those. We do need, because because it's requirement in state law, we need you to make those findings affirmatively. You can set those out prior to your motion in support of it, or you can make your motion and set those out afterwards. But I would like at least an affirmative finding of those priority of those B1 through 7 as identified in the code.
Okay, well, so prior to my motion to approve, I'll say, number one, the variance is the minimum variance to make it possible for the reasonable use of the land. Being pretty familiar with this and the property itself and the trees and the drainage and all this, I think that's satisfied. The granting the variance is in harmony with general purpose. Obviously, I think that's pretty obvious and not injurious to adjoining properties. I think that's what Brad speaks to when he wants to probably put a qualification on the granting of this. Brad, and I'll let you, maybe try to amend the motion if needed. 3, the literal interpretation of the requirements of the division would deprive the applicant of the rights to commonly enjoyed by the owners of the other properties in the same district under the terms of the division. I think that's I think we're fine there. Special conditions with respect to which a variance is sought do not result from the action of the applicant. If there's anything there. Granting the variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this division to other land, buildings, or structures in the same district. I think this is a unique property within our neighborhood to start with. And frankly, I see all these things as individual situations anyway. So there's any privilege there. 6, if applicable, there is sufficient water and wastewater capacity in fire service, blah, blah, blah. I think we've gone over that, acknowledging that we're good. 7, the granting the variance will not merely serve as a convenience to the applicant, but will alleviate some demonstrable and unusual hardship or difficulty. I think there's some hardship involved. So I think we satisfy the 7. And therefore, and Brad, jump in here if you want to make a separate motion, because I think you and I are on the same page with respect to liking the neighbors to be in favor of these things.
I mean, yes, but I think that, I want this to be pushed through, but I don't think that we can just push it through as is, just saying yes. I definitely think we need to
Sure.
come up with a solution and then maybe get a soft vote. I don't know if that's a term, a trial vote, before we not, I know this is taking up more and more time. But I want it to work, but I don't think just voting on it right now, we can make it work.
Megan, is that a thing? A soft vote? So we can kind of see where we need to land if we're to put some stipulations on kind of like an approval of this, specifically like, the neighbors, some written, supportive letters.
You can certainly have those conversations and discussion. I think you'll be able to tell any motion that's made has to have a second and a vote. You can vote on individual components, or you can vote on it as a whole.
All right. So let's,
that
Brooke, why don't we, yeah, that's great, Megan. Let's get productive here. Let's do this soft vote. Brooke, where would you land if that was if that was the contingency that Brad supplied?
Well, I have an alternate motion, and it's a point of order. It raises a point of order, and I'll lay it out for you, and Megan, you can tell us how to deal with it. The decision of the zoning official here was communicated to WAC on April the 8th. That was the letter from David Casares to the WAC engineer stating what the setback requirement, that the plan was in violation of the 3 different ordinances that are noticed for the hearing today. And then The application for a variance was given to the city, I'm assuming it was given to the city the day it was signed, which was May 18. The statute that authorizes the Board of Adjustment to hear an appeal, which is what we're doing here, requires that the appeal be filed no later than 20 days after the date of the decision that's being appealed. And the question for Megan is, I think that requirement in the amended statute, which would supersede the timeline even in the Rollingwood ordinance, is jurisdictional.
Uh-oh, Brooke, you just got above my pay grade. What do you got there, Megan?
The statute referencing is the local government code 211.010B, which was amended in 2019. It used to say a reasonable time period for appeal, and now it says that the notice of appeal must be filed within 20 days of the, no later than the 20th day after the date of decision of the zoning official.
While Megan looks that up, I'll jump in and offer some clarity if that's all right. From staff's position, this was really difficult because the city council had to make certain decisions before it was practical to bring it to you all, because if they did not sign off on the landscaping plans and the parking plans, then this project was not viable. And so we worked with legal counsel on what it was kind of a chicken and egg situation. Which do we send it to first? It was more burdensome on the applicant to send it to you all and then have them pay the fees associated with it, if they were then going to have to go back and not be approved for the landscaping. So that's why we reached the decision that we did. I've had these plans since October of last year. And we've been working through this incrementally. It's very unusual to have a public entity on park zoned land. I believe it is the appropriate zoning in this case. If this was commercially zoned, they would effectively not be able to make any improvements on their property. And it does give the community a level of oversight as to what happens. But that said, city council oversees everything, all development within zoning. And so we had to get their approval first, which is, that's what we were trying to work through before we brought that to you all.
Understood, Carrie. Megan, do you have anything further as it pertains to the point of order that's been brought up by Brooke?
The point of order that I would raise as a formal motion would be, I would move to dismiss the appeal because it's untimely filed. And the concern,
And the result being what, Brooke?
With the result being that, and it's not a good result. The result is that you can't then appeal a similar decision for another 180 days. But the statute, if the board is without jurisdiction, if the board approves it, one of the neighbors appeals, the city will have to defend an appeal on a point of a legal point that may not be sustainable. So you don't want to put the city in the position of having to do that either.
I think it was my understanding that this is an application for a for a variance. This is a request for a variance. This is not, and I guess maybe I misunderstood that, Carrie, and I apologize in the beginning, but this is not an appeal of a determination because it's a request for a variance from the current requirements of the city, and that simply that the engineer set those out in a letter upon preliminary review of a set of plans that were provided in order to assist the developer or the property owner in determining what variances would be required and whether or not they wish to pursue that variance process for any of those conditions.
That's correct.
Is the city treating this as an appeal of an administrative decision?
No, we're not treating this as an appeal.
Then I don't
Nor
think,
is it on the agenda as an appeal. It's not on the agenda as an appeal. Hey, sorry to interrupt, but the Goyles are on the phone if you guys want to get their input, since they are the neighbor that is the most impacted by this project.
I would welcome that. We're going to need to reopen again.
yeah,
If
I
go ahead,
could,
Brooke.
if I could respond to I think the statute applies to the situation we have here, because it's a request for a variance from a decision made by an administrative official related to a specific zoning application, doesn't have to be zoning application. So we have an application. We have a request for variance of the decision with respect to that application. So I think it falls within the statute, and we don't have, I think the timeline that was put in place by the amendment 2 years ago doesn't give us authority to act. And either we need to
These were not a zoning decision. These were comments on the plans.
and today and let the city attorney advise us on this point, or we're potentially putting the city in the position where an appeal can be filed of any, what action are we taking today? An appeal could be filed of that action if it grants a variance. And we're putting the city in the position of defending what might be an invalid order.
Gary, you had something, as Brooke was finishing, you had something you wanted to comment on that regard to that.
Sure. Yeah. If that's the case, then I'm concerned about all of these, because this was just a zoning review. I would be concerned about how we didn't conduct this one any differently from how we've looked at any other in the past. So this was our standard. We issued a review, our engineer reviewed it. He said there in the setbacks, they said, hey, we'd like to seek a variance because we think we've got. And we noticed we were prepared for this because we've been in discussion for a long time, and we made sure that once the city council meeting was done, that the variance was applied for and the notices went out immediately so that we could get them on that next available meeting date.
Amber?
Megan, and you feel as though this is a variance and not an appeal, and that would be your opinion as the city attorney.
Well, and I know you guys have been working with Charlie on all of this leading up to this meeting, but in reading your code, it talks about appeals separate from requests for variances or applications for a special exception. So those, there are words and terms like 107493 talks about appeals, but it's not in the sense of everything is an appeal under 211. There's an appeal, there's a request for a variance, there's a special exception, and you have all these different processes spelled out, or at least identified under the authority of the Board of Adjustment. And so I have always understood it to be that an application for a variance is a request for a variance from the codes as they are set out and applied by the city, but not necessarily an appeal of a decision of an employee, whether it's the building official or the zoning official, in applying those code provisions to a particular property. But I can certainly double check with Charlie really quick.
Brooke, with that being
and y'all can
said,
let property owners speak.
with that being said, you've got a motion basically that, and you'll have to clarify it a bit, but basically killing the need even to vote on the variance, given with the comments of Carrie and council and Amber. Would you withdraw that, or where are we on this?
I don't withdraw it. I would respond by saying, if we're acting under 107-492, a board may authorize, the board being the Board of Adjustment, may authorize upon appeal in specific cases such variances from the terms of this division as will not be contrary to the public interest. And below that is the subsection B, which is what we're working on. You know, it is the action we're being asked to take today. So I think you'll find, if the statute is reviewed, that what we are doing here as a board is reviewing an appeal of the decision of the city engineer that a building permit cannot be issued for these plans because of the conflict between the plans and these three ordinances.
Understood. I understood. I've sat through a couple of these things, and I've sat through some other stuff too. So I'm curious, after all the questions that we've asked, why now the point of order to bring this up? Because I feel like all the other questions you had with regard to the courts were just like, this was sort of like an end, kind of, well, just in case I got to kill this deal.
No.
Go on. Where is this coming from?
Coming from
Yeah.
the procedure where you get the facts in a hearing first, and then you, as you're taking action, you address whatever might be any jurisdictional or legal issues associated with the action you're being asked to do. I'm sorry, I'm hiding behind the log, but I'm not.
I'm
No,
going to have to
10-4.
agree with Carrie. You know, Carrie brought up that this is the way we've been doing this. And if this becomes an issue, then I mean, that's kind of changing our whole process. So I'm, we're here, we're doing this. I think, there's no point in trying to fight this point.
Well, with that being said, Brooke, if you're not going to withdraw the motion, we need to, look for a second. Actually, Brooke, do you mind restating that? Say again, ma'am?
Chris, you had a motion and didn't ask for a second, and read the 7 criteria. So I think there should be a request for a second, or to see if your motion dies or if it goes for a vote, and then you could take action, or you could ask for a second on Brooke's motion.
Well,
I'll second his motion.
All right, we've got a second. All those in favor?
Which motion are we voting on?
Yeah, Amber, do you mind? Well, I made a motion. I made a motion to approve agenda item number 3. We took, that it can be constructed between the rear setback line and the rear lot line. I gave the 7 criteria that I thought were demonstrated. And we had a second by Jim. Is that correct?
Right. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Will there be
very good
motion?
I'm sorry, again?
I'm asking if you're going to allow discussion on the motion.
Sure.
Have to.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we have to. That's right. We have to, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so help me out on coach me up on the order here. We've got a motion, we've got a second. I think we're supposed to have discussion on it, correct?
Yes.
Or we can go to a vote.
Mhm.
Discussion, then a vote?
Yes.
Well,
Understood.
like I said before, if we're just going to go straight to yes or no vote, I'd like to add that the motion include the requirement that the adjacent property owners give a written agreement to it for it to be valid.
Understood. How do we do that logistically here in terms of adding Brad's request to the motion to approve?
Chris, do you accept
I do. I think
Amendment to the
that's
motion.
fine.
Conditions.
Do we need to have any stipulations on a definition of adjacent? Just who's next door? Does that work? Or just no folks that are immediately next door have an issue? Does that satisfy?
I would say adjacent would be having a common,
Property
sorry, I'm trying to
line.
not stutter, common property line.
I would agree.
Understood. Is in terms of just making sure this is all our I's are dotted, our T's are crossed. Do we need to kind of clean that up just in the I guess an amendment to the motion?
If I understood what Brad is suggesting, it would be that any motion to approve be contingent upon written agreement from each adjoining property owner that they are satisfied with the application.
I believe that's well stated. Okay, so the next action then is anybody else have discussion items regarding this motion that's up for vote?
I do have discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't believe that this application meets the criteria of subsection B3. That literal interpretation of the requirements would deprive applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by owners of other properties. Here we have an owner of a property. There's room to build 4 tennis courts in a manner compliant with the ordinances. And so we would be granting to this property owner the right to build within the 30-foot setback line on park property. That right is a right enjoyed by the city with respect to other park property. We have several different park properties. And so what we're granting to this one property owner is a right that's not enjoyed by other owners of park property. Unless we're in essence saying we don't care about the 30-foot setback. The same thing with respect to item number 5. We must find affirmatively in order to grant this grant this variance, that granting the variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this division to other land, buildings, or structures in the same district. So what we're granting to this applicant is a special privilege to build new facilities within the 30-foot setback line. And that is a right that is not provided by application of the ordinances to other owners of the property. So I think there on those 2 items, this application for variance would fail. That we can't make the requirements, the findings necessary to grant the variance. And I don't think it meets the criteria of B1, that it's the minimum variance that would make possible the reasonable use of the land, because we have a diagram in what the applicant has provided that shows us that they can build 4 courts on the property without building it in the setback. So it's not the minimum variance that would be required for them to be able to enjoy their property the way they want to. So for those reasons, I don't think I can make the findings that would be required to grant this variance.
Understood. Any other comment with the discussion in regard to the motion? Keith, Jim? Okay. Let's take it to a vote then. We need on a Zoom thing like this, Carrie, when we take it to a vote, don't we do a roll? Correct?
Yeah, Chris, can you call each member's name out and let them vote?
Yes, ma'am. I can do that. We'll start with my screen show. So do I need to restate the the motion? Are we good?
That would be helpful, I think.
Megan's smiling at me like this is like I don't know what I'm doing here. All right, we've got a motion to approve the item number 3 for a court to be constructed and maintained in the area between the rear setback line and the rear lot line. Approval of this motion per Brad is going to be subject to the owners of the adjacent, or I guess it share property lines with the Western Hills Athletic Club. The approval of this will be contingent upon, I guess, their blessing, for lack of a better term. Does that suffice?
I thought it was written consent.
We'll go with it. Written consent. I guess they're not the dear Lord Jesus Christ. They can't give us a blessing. We satisfied with that as a motion? Good. All right. We don't need to re-second that, correct?
No.
All right. Let's take it to a vote. Let's go ahead and start with Brooke so we can do this in order.
I vote no on grounds that I don't believe the variance application was timely filed, and on the second ground that we can't make the findings that are required by subsection B.
Very good. Keith?
In favor? Yes.
Very good. Jim?
In favor, yes.
Very good. Brad?
You're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, I vote yes.
Very good. I will vote in favor. Motion passes to grant the variance with respect to item number 3. Let's see here. Okay. So with that being said, we need to move to, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, item number 4, public hearing, discussion of possible action on the variance from the city's code of ordinances, section 107-242, regarding the requirement of the 30-foot greenbelt zone for each lot in a park district which abuts a lot in a residential district for at the Western Hills Athletic Club at 4801 Rollingwood Drive. Here again, we open this for the public to a public hearing at 7:35. Anybody wish to speak at this time regarding this item? And by the way, Mike Fitzgerald, FIDFO, you've got your hand up, and I don't think that you might actually intend to have it up.
Okay, thanks. I'm gonna just sign off. Thanks a lot, Brett, everybody.
Thank you. Anybody public side want to speak? Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and close the public hearing at this time at 7:36. We'll open it up for discussion with the board. Is anything further on this? I understand the intertwinedness of these.
I'd like to make a motion to combine agenda items 4 and 5.
Asked about that earlier, Brad. Megan, is that given the ruling, if you will, on item number 3 and the sort of the intertwinedness of these, do we still need to just kind of run through the order like you said, or can we do as Brad suggested?
Well, the purpose of the standards for a variance request is for you to evaluate those 7 factors dependent, because they are different code provisions. There will be different considerations that the board should consider. And so I would request that the motions at least be identified separately. If you want to refer back to the discussion and the public hearing from agenda item 3, as it certainly encompassed all of these factors that are going to be considered by the board under 4 and 5, you could do that. But I do request the separate motions for purposes of this record.
Understood.
Okay, so
Brad,
I take my motion back.
yeah, no worries. But Brad, do I understand just for expediency's sake here too, that any motion on these 4 and 5 is going to include the language that you came up, or actually Brooke came up with,
Yes, I think so. I mean, I almost kind of think like we've already kind of discussed it all with 3, because I think all of our intent is kind of in the same spot.
Understood.
So yes.
Okay. Is there any, because we want to go through these per Megan. Is there any discussion here?
I suppose that it wouldn't really matter if we didn't add that in, because if they don't give written consent on one of them, the whole thing kind of flops. So
understood. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Anybody else on this item? Okay. Go ahead.
I would just state I have the same concerns as to our authority to grant. As I stated before, I think the appeal has been untimely and have the same objections with respect to the findings.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Anybody like to make a motion on this? I can if need be. I'll do it. I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance with respect to item number 4, granting a variance to the requirement of a 30-foot green belt zone for the lot in the Park District, WAC. Again, I think Megan, stop me if I don't need to go through all these individually again, but I think our 7 criteria that we've gone over with item number 3 are within my motion here are fine, and we satisfy, if you will. Do I need to go through each one of them individually?
Yes, please.
Oh, Megan. Okay. Do I need to read all of them, Megan?
You can certainly summarize like you did previously.
Okay, let's do that. Number 1, making it possible for the reasonable use of the land. I think that satisfies, especially with respect to the trees. 2, granting it's in harmony with the general purpose and the intent of this division. I think that based on what's trying to get accomplished here, I think it's absolutely the case. Number 3, literal interpretation of the requirements of this division would deprive the applicant of the rights commonly enjoyed by the owners of other properties in the same district under the terms of the division. I think that's why our board exists. We get to make decisions on these things based on a variety of set of variables, if you will. And I think that number 3 is satisfied. Number 4, special conditions with respect to which a variance is sought don't result from the action of the applicant. I'm satisfied with number 4. Granting the variance will not confer on the applicant any special privileges denied by the division of other land, building structures in the same district. I differ from Brooke in this regard and believe that's satisfied. Number 6, if applicable, there's sufficient wastewater capacity. I think that has been visited as it was visited in item number 3. That's satisfactory to me. Number 7, granting the variance will not merely serve as a convenience to the applicant, but will alleviate some of the unusual hardship or difficulty and warrant the variance. I think that has been demonstrated by Western Hills, and I believe that is satisfied as well. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Very good. Let's take that to vote. We'll begin with Brooke. Or discussion, Brooke, on the second, if you'd like.
Well, the discussion is that I don't believe the applicant has provided a showing that would show that would meet the findings required for B1, 3, 5, or 7. And for that reason, I would vote no. I would also, because I don't believe that the applicant timely filed their appeal, and we are without jurisdiction to grant it.
Yes, ma'am. Noted. Keith?
Favor, yes.
Jim?
I'm in favor, yes.
Brad?
Yes.
And I will vote in favor as well. Motion passes. We'll go to item number 5. I'll read it out loud. Public hearing, discussion, and possible action on the variance from the city's Code of Ordinances, section 107-422, a non-conforming structure may not be altered to increase the extent of the nonconformity for at the Western Hills Athletic Club at 4801 Rollingwood Drive. Just so we dot our I's, we're going to open the public hearing here at 7:42. Anybody wish to speak? I am satisfied with the lack of hands. I'd like to close the public hearing at 7:43. We'll open that. We'll open this rather, item number 5 for discussion on the board. I believe we know where we're going in terms of discussion. Anybody wish to speak up before we, or maybe I would make a motion?
Can I get a little more background on exactly what this is about?
Jim, as I understand it, and I'll speak to it first because I actually had to deal with this, but non-conforming structure is one that exists currently that doesn't satisfy like setbacks, etc. Generally speaking, within our code, you're not able to improve that structure that is currently non-conforming for whatever reason. I think in this case, it's obviously within the setback. And beyond that, I would probably need somebody else to comment on that. But that's my general understanding of, in terms of improvement upon a non-conforming structure.
Yeah, I think the intent of it is because if it's a grandfathered structure, it kind of creates a gray zone of when you're trying to fix things. So that's kind of taking away some of that gray.
Jim, I think we've seen it outside this application, but we've seen it where folks had previously tried to leave, like garages within setbacks, like on corner lots, et cetera. And, they'll tear everything down, when they're remodeling a house, they'll tear everything off that garage and, what used to be single story garages, all of a sudden, a slab that's in the setback, and then they create a 2-story garage. I think those are some circumstances that existed prior to that on the residential side.
And I think for this site, it's because they're already in the 30-foot now,
right?
And the new addition also is going to be in the 30-foot. Therefore, increasing the extent of the non-conformity.
Easy for you to say.
This is Brooke. To put it plainly, they've got 2 non-conforming courts today. There'll be 4 non-conforming courts if this is granted. All 4 will be in the 30-foot setback.
So this is not about a building. This is about just a structure in the setback.
It's about increasing the amount of nonconformity by adding 2 more courts in the setback.
Okay, then I'm good.
Understood. Any other comments? Okay. Like I'm the motion guy today. So therefore, I'd like to make a motion with no other further comments. Make a motion to approve item number 5 related to section 107.42 to granting a variance for a non-conforming structure to be altered or increase the extent that's not conforming to WAC. I have a second. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got to go to 7. Excuse me. How could I forget? 1, minimum variance makes possible reasonable use of the land, I believe, satisfied. Number 2, the granted the variance is harmony of the general purpose, satisfactory based. Number 3, literal interpretation wouldn't deprive the applicant of rights to commonly enjoyed by the owners of other properties. I think we're satisfied in this regard as well in this special case. Special conditions with respect to which a variance is sought. Number 4, special conditions with respect to which a variance is sought don't result from the action of the applicant. I'm satisfied. Granting the variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege. I believe that is satisfactory and almost implicit in our role here. Number 6, if applicable, there is a sufficient water and wastewater that's been visited on. I believe we're satisfactory there. Number 7, granting the variance will not merely serve as a convenience to the applicant, but alleviate some unusual hardship. I believe we have satisfied, or I believe they have demonstrated that is a satisfactory item. And with that, I'll be looking for a second for that approval.
Second.
Got a second from Jim. Comment on the motion second.
On the motion second,
Say again.
did you say you want to comment on the motion to second?
I believe that's what we've been doing. An opportunity to comment on that second. Is that not accurate? Discussion, rather.
I see. Got it.
With no discussion visible to me, let's go ahead and take the vote in the order we've done before. Brooke, I'll call on you first for your vote.
Vote no for two reasons. One, I don't believe that the applicant has shown that the variance meets the criteria of B1, 3, 5, or 7. And without those findings being made, we're without authority to grant an application that doesn't, where we can't make those findings. I don't think the evidence allows us to make those findings. And second, I vote no because I believe the applicant did not timely file their request for a variance and that we are without jurisdiction to act.
Understood. Keith.
Yes.
Jim.
In favor.
Brad.
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. Motion passes to approve the variance. So we are here at 7:49. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I get a second on that motion?
I'll second. Keith.
Right. Keith, thank you. I believe per my sheet here, we can take a voice vote. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you for your time, everybody, and have a fantastic evening.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Chris, for everything.
Thank
Thank
you.
It's a long one.
Yeah, nice job, Brad.